This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, I guess I should be good to go.
Perfect. Let's just wait for a couple of more
Yeah,
minutes and then we can get going.
that is a great idea. So I will present this also. So it is okay. You can't see like your own sort of like speaking bubble while I'm sharing. I think like I can see you talk and I can see your video, but I don't think anybody else is. You're just seeing my screen right now. I hope.
That's fine.
Okay, perfect. That's great. You think we're gonna get some good turnout?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, even
Some
if
people have already joined, so we'll see.
oh, nice. It's great. Okay. Oh God. I think also probably as well, like once we start, you might still find some people requesting to join.
Yeah, I'll take care of that.
Awesome.
I guess we'll wait another minute and then we can get started. All right, in the sense of not losing any time. Hi, everybody. Good evening, at least for us in Austria, it's evening. Welcome to our very first webinar at GLEAP. It's great to see such fantastic turnout as well. Definitely a sign we'll be doing this a lot more often in the future, hopefully. Today, Hussein will be your host, walking you through how to build co-browse tours with our new editor. He'll cover everything, I think, in the first round about 20 minutes, and then we'll open the floor for questions. You can either unmute yourself or just drop your questions in the chat, and then we'll try and moderate things. Yeah, I wish you all loads of interesting insights from Hussein. And Hussein, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Isabella. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to have you all today and I'm very excited to obviously show you and talk about product tours. I have a very short presentation planned for you all, and then we're actually going to build a product tour together. And obviously, while we're building the tour, I'm going to be providing some insights, walking you guys through some best practices, and generally, speaking about how you can make the most out of our standard product tours, as well as obviously the new co-browse tours. And we'll also highlight a bit what has changed from our old version or our old product tours. With that being said, I would like to just walk you guys through the agenda very quickly. So we'll obviously, talk about what are product tours and how do we set them up. We'll also talk about, how to basically get the most out of a product tour. And then we'll also be covering how we can pretty much tailor product tours for specific use cases. And like Isabella mentioned, we'll leave the last maybe 20, 15 minutes for any Q&A and opening the floor up for any questions. Very, very slowly and kind of take a big step back and just cover why you would use a product tour in the first place. So these are basically kind of the main use cases that we had in mind when we were building product tours in Gleep. The first one obviously being onboarding new users, driving feature adoption, preventative customer care, and obviously a huge one is education and obviously highlighting new features. So, you could use a combination of all of these when you're building your product tour, or really just take one of these aspects or pillars and focus on them while you're building your tour. I wanted to share this with you because it might not always be super obvious when you're getting started with Gleep, or even if you use Gleep for a long time. Why would I really need a product tour, or why would I set up a product tour in place? It could be, again, for any of these reasons or just one of them. Our customers, and I'm sure as many of our customers are on the call here today, they understand and they know that product tours can have a very big effect on the user experience, especially when we're talking about applications and web platforms that are not necessarily complex, but they could be a little bit hard at those beginning phases in setting things up. They could not always be super obvious when a user has created an account for the first time, or you've reeled in that new customer. It might not always be super obvious for your users and your customers how to actually use your product. Another big part of this is obviously having the preventative customer care aspect play into it. Is you might be experiencing a very large volume of people reaching out or customers reaching out asking, how do I set this up? What's the best way to actually do this? Or, how do I actually, use this feature? And that's where, product tours really have a very strong role to play because they can do a very large myriad of things, while at the same time, you have full control over your user experience. You have full control over what you want to educate the customer on. And you obviously have a lot of control when it comes to the co-browse tours, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. I then want to also move on to just some things that we always kind of want to ask ourselves or think about when we're creating a product tour, regardless of it's a standard product tour or our new co-browse tour. So the first thing I want kind of everybody to keep in the back of their minds when they're creating a tour for the first time, or going back to one that's been there for a while and making any sort of updates or any refreshes, is how easy is it for my users or my customers to actually complete this flow? So as you all may know, product tours don't really have an end, and you can control, when the product tour starts and when it ends. So what happens a lot is maybe you're creating product tours that are too long, and somewhere in that flow or somewhere in that product tour, the customer kind of maybe loses interest. They're not very interactive. They don't want to be reading a lot of text. And obviously, having to read through a lot of different steps just to reach that end goal of either using the product for the first time or, setting things up for the first time. So it's always really important to remember that the easier the flow, the better results that you're generally going to see. And this kind of applies to both, the co-browse tours and the product tours. But I put the emphasis here more on the standard product tours without, the co-browsing feature. So always kind of keep in mind that how easy it is for the customer to actually go through the entire flow. Another thing you should kind of keep in mind is, am I overloading my users with too much information? So this kind of ties into the earlier point. So again, because you obviously have control over the entire product tour in Gleep, you could sometimes create a product tour that could be a bit boring in a way, or it's just too much information, it's too many steps, and it's a lot of things that the customer just needs to do for them to actually start using the product. And then the third one is, how interactive does this tour need to be? And this is what's really going to decide if you want to go for, a co-browse tour or just the standard non-co-browse tour. So usually when we're talking about like having a very interactive experience for your users or your customers, that's a very big reason why we created the co-browse tours. And we're also going to talk about this in a little bit. But co-browse tours are meant to be a more interactive product tour. They're meant for the use cases or the situations where your customers need to be educated or they need to know how to use something for the first time, but you want that experience to be a bit fun. You don't want them to be constantly clicking around multiple steps. You want the experience to be kind of self-guided in a way. And that's why you kind of have to think about if the tour needs to be interactive or not. I also want to talk about when should I use a standard product tour versus a co-browse tour. So again, do I want the user experience to be more interactive or more static? Or do I want it to be a bit more dynamic or again a bit more static? If you're looking for a more interactive experience and you want there to be a sort of user experience where again it's more of a self-guided user experience, co-browse tools are really great for that. If it's more of just some simple stuff around like, hey, here's where you can create your account for the first time. Here's where you can update your password. Here's how you do some, very basic functionality. Standard product tours really come in handy there because the user doesn't really need to interact with them much. There are only a couple of steps or a few steps, and they're not constantly reading through very large amounts of info or, large paragraphs. It's short, it's to the point, and basically just highlights how to use something. Another question is, do I want my users to kind of help or serve themselves? If so, then again, a co-browse tour would really come in handy here. And then ultimately, what's my ultimate goal once the tour is over? And this kind of ties back to the first slide that we kind of went to together, which is when I am creating the tour or when the tour ends, I need to have a goal in mind. And this goal in mind could either be, educating the customer, highlighting a new feature, playing on that preventative care aspect, or just for onboarding. And with that being said, I actually want to build a product tour with you all together. And we're going to go through pretty much every aspect of it. What are some of the best practices around that, and how do you kind of structure a product tour? And we'll actually launch it together and see what it looks like. So let me start by doing that. So I'm obviously right here on our Gleep dashboard. And depending obviously on the project that you choose, I'm just going to choose our product tour demo project in this case. And you'll always find the product tours in our outreach section. And then if you scroll down here towards the education section, this is even something that we really highlight, and that's why we've even put it under the education section, is because ultimately this is a really great way to educate your users and just let them know how to, get the most out of what they're already using. So in this case, I'm actually going to create a co-browse tour with you all together. I will just need to grab some info right here, and we'll start it from scratch. All right. And I will actually delete this product tour so we can, start from scratch completely. All right, so obviously there are no templates or anything because again, we want you to have full control over the product tour itself. So we'll just create a new co-browse tour together. And this is what you're always going to see when you're going to be creating these co-browse tours. So we'll design it together. I'll obviously put in the URL, website, or platform where I'd like to start the tour on. You always obviously have to make sure that the latest Gleep SDK is installed. Hit start and you're ready to go. So this is the first thing that we see. And this is usually obviously the page that you've navigated to when you're ready and you've said, okay, this is the page I actually want to start my product tour on. Before this step, it's actually important to kind of consider where do I actually want to start the product tour? Because maybe at the beginning, when users are still being onboarded, it's still very new. They haven't really done anything in your platform yet. It could be a good idea to kind of hold off on a product tour until they start to actually interact with the core functionality of your platform or your application or your website. So maybe on some specific pages, maybe some landing pages or the pages that they usually would reach once they've set everything up for the first time. Maybe at that point, it could be a good idea to actually start the product tour on those specific pages, because again, we always want to keep in mind that we don't really want to overload our users and we want to have a smooth user experience. So in our case, I want to start the tour here. And instantly, as soon as we do that, we have a couple of different options. We can create a centered message. And this is very similar to what we've seen, or if anybody has used the previous product tours, has probably seen already. And a centered message is basically, as it sounds, it's a message that gets displayed in the center of the screen. And it's not super interactive. It's just a way to kind of let them know, maybe this is the next step. Maybe this is the best way to actually, do something. But it's a great way to also start off a product tour, because maybe you want it to be front and center in the middle. Hey, you're about to go through, some onboarding experience. You're about to go through a product tour. It's a great way to actually start it. So in this case, I will create a centered message, and I'll say something like, hey, welcome to our platform. Happy to have you here. You will now be guided on how to use feature X. I don't want anybody to obviously pay very close attention to the wording. You know your customers best, you know your product best, so you'll always know how to best structure the messaging. There isn't really any best practices or tips here. Nothing is a one-size-fits-all solution. Depending again on how interactive you want the product tour to be, this message will either be longer or shorter, or it could even be either more complex or more simple. And in this case, I am good to go. I don't have anything else to add. If I was obviously creating product tours in multiple languages, which is a very strong, selling point of Gleep, is that you obviously want to have the same experience for all of your users, regardless of their language. And a big reason why this isn't, AI translated, because as many of you may know, Gleep does support a lot of AI translations, is because we don't want to get the translation wrong or put the translation in the hands of the AI, especially when it comes to product tours, because you obviously want to use very specific wording. And this is a big reason why there isn't sort of any AI translations here. But depending on the languages you want to support or are supporting already, you would obviously change the language, type out in that language what it should actually display, and then you should be good to go. And in this case, I'm just going to save this step. And I'm going to start to use pointers at this point, because pointers is basically what is going to allow the AI to actually click into parts of the platform or parts of the website and actually go through a complete flow. So this is a big part of the new product tour experience and the new product tour editor, is that you couldn't really do this before. You didn't really have the option of creating one tour which spanned over multiple pages. Previously with Gleep, you could only really create one product tour, set up the steps, and there wasn't really a mechanism in place where you could actually navigate to different places in the same tour. And that's it's a big push that we did recently, because we understood and we took in a lot of feedback from our customers that a product tour needs to be more interactive. And as someone who's setting it up for the first time, You obviously don't need to be a developer. You don't need to be someone with a lot of technical background. We created product tours, and we created it in a simple way so that anybody could really launch a product tour, and they don't necessarily need to be someone who's very technically advanced to be able to do this. And that's why a big reason is, a big reason why we came up with this new editor is we understood that experiences are more interactive, and that in a lot of cases, especially for complex SaaS products, especially for platforms that need a lot of setup in the beginning, having that interactive experience and having the AI walk the customer through experience that you create is very, very valuable, because they're obviously interacting with your product or interacting with your business for the first time. And you obviously want to leave a really good impression. At the same time, you also want to play around with that preventative customer care solution, because if you know previously in the past, if this is a step or if this is a part in my process where customers have come to me with feedback and they've told me, I wasn't able to do this, I wasn't able to set this up, I'm looking for some best practices here. Having a product tour in place would basically kind of remove all of that, which is really cool. But back to actually building the product tour, I'm going to add a pointer. And what's really cool about the pointer is it basically breaks down all of the UI elements in the page and allows you to click on the element, which basically should, prompt the next step in the tour. And using pointers is what's actually going to allow us to have the AI or the co-browse tour click into links or click into buttons and progress in that flow. So I'll choose this one as an example. And the important point to note here is that once we create this pointer step, we obviously have to tell the tour what the next step is and how that next step should actually be executed. So whether it's a button the user actually clicks on, a simple next button, or clicking on the element, which will actually allow the AI to click into it. And as we can see, if we have it as a next button, we just have the save step option. As soon as we change it to click on element, we also then have save step and obviously trigger click, which is what we're looking for. We could also do a text input and basically wait for text input from the user, or we can automatically fill in the text as well. But in this case, we're going to be using the click on element button, and we'll save the step and trigger the click. And as you guys can see here in the product tour editor itself, we mark any point in the tour where the action of actually clicking somewhere else happens with this kind of cool little graphic or icon. And this obviously can say anything along the lines of like, here's where you can get started, and basically click here to, create your account for the first time, to create a strong password, to set up multi-factor authentication, to create or set up your notifications, whatever that might be, right? And this could be something like, this is where you can click to be able to access your billing info. I'm obviously creating this with you guys right now because we're obviously going to launch this, and I know sometimes over Zoom and Google Meet, you might not be able to hear the audio of the co-browse tour, but what's really great is we'll be able to actually see the AI clicking into these different elements. So in this case, again, save step and trigger click. As we can see, the actual page itself has changed. It's no longer those kind of 4 boxes that we had in that initial landing page. So in this case, I'm going to use another pointer, and I'd basically like the AI to click into here. And this is where I'm going to say, for your platform. And I'll save that step. In this case, I'm just going to keep it simple. So I really don't want to keep going with multiple steps, because we just really want to highlight the ability for the AI to actually move between pages. I just want to give some general kind of tips here. This is where I was kind of mentioning earlier in the webinar, we don't want to overload our users, right? So if you can try and keep the number of steps or clicks down as much as possible, we always recommend that. But we understand that, especially again, if your product or your platform is very complex, you'll most likely have a lot of steps. But again, depending on how interactive you want these tools to be, This is really where you have to decide if pointers or centered messages are going to do the trick, or if just using pointers and having the user themselves go through that experience would work. So if I obviously create a pointer here, and in this case, I don't want to navigate to another page. I don't want the AI to click anywhere. I'll obviously use the next button. When do you use the next button versus having the AI click into the element or clicking the having the trigger be the actual click? We always recommend that if you want the users to kind of self-pace themselves, so maybe they're not particularly fast learners, maybe you know already your customer behavior in a way where they like to take their time in doing things and setting things up. They're not maybe always in a rush. They like to actually read through all of the documentation, whatever that might be. Having a next button would be very helpful in that case, because you're basically giving your users their own time, their own pace to complete the product tour. If you think that they might be actually bored quite easily, they're not going to be very receptive to reading large amounts of text and then themselves actually clicking next and going through the other steps. At that point, it could be a good idea to actually use the co-browsing feature versus the next button, right? In this case, I'm going to also save this step, but I will also delete it. Obviously, at any point in time, you can change where these steps are. So if I want a step to be actually before this, I can very easily just change their ordering and their positioning, which is really cool. And if obviously I need to go back at any time and change the text, I can do that quite easily. In this case, I will actually move this back. And I'll save and close here. All right. Obviously, it's going to generate a voiceover, and it's going to also generate a voiceover every time you edit the product tour or you basically like launch it for the first time. And the voiceover is obviously the interactive part of the co-browse tours. So taking this section, we'll go through these one by one and basically just explain them real quick. Obviously allowing users to dismiss the tour. This is pretty important because if it's a tour that absolutely needs to happen and it's a very critical part of the onboarding flow, you would obviously not want to allow users to be able to dismiss it because it's kind of like a must thing they have to do before they interact with the product. So this is a very important point to also think about when you're creating your tour. Is it so important to my onboarding flow and so important in general that it can't be missed or skipped? If yes, then definitely I wouldn't allow users to dismiss the tour. If it's something that maybe isn't extremely necessary and you maybe feel like your customers are learning through actually interacting and setting things up and obviously making mistakes and then learning through those mistakes, maybe having it dismissible could be better in terms of user experience. This is simply showing a background flow, so these are just some nice little effects that we'll see once we actually launch the tour and see what it looks like from the user perspective. Reading the text out loud. So obviously this is really important as well because again, if you want the tour to be more interactive, you would most likely want the AI to read the text out loud. If you don't want it to be so interactive and you're only just looking for the ability to have the users themselves click into the different options and go through the flow, then obviously you might not really need to use it. We have a lot of voices supported at the moment, and I'm sure in the future we'll probably be adding some more, but you can obviously choose which voice from the drop-down menu right here. And then this is a really cool part as well that not a lot of people might get right at the beginning. So if someone is actually having a chat with Kai, Kai is obviously our AI bot. If someone's having a chat with Kai, you can actually put in here a description, and that description will be used to basically train or let Kai know that when a user is on this page or when a user is taking a specific action for the first time, Kai should actually suggest this product tour on its own in the chat. So if someone is using your platform and they are trying to access maybe their billing, they're trying to access their account info, you could basically just tell them or tell Kai, sorry, in this case, that you should show the user how to actually access this info. And if they do open up the chat and they ask a question around, hey, how do I set this up? How do I set my notifications, for example? How do I set up my billing info? At that point, Kai can actually suggest the product tour. The user can start the product tour from the chat, and then the co-browse tour will obviously play on its own. And then this is just the start page, so you obviously have to define where the start page is. In this case, it's just going to be basically that same start page that I was earlier. And then you obviously have some options in regards to targeting. If you want to use any sort of audience filters, setting up the frequency. We've already set up the time-based rules. Something I wanted to highlight here that could be very cool is that we do have the option of triggering a product tour with a URL. So you can basically send this link to your customers or your users. And once they actually click on that link, it would take them to the product tour and start it also on its own. So this could be a really great way for, again, onboarding new users and even for customer support at times, because this could be a really great way to actually show off your product. And it's also a demo if you think about it. So it's you can actually create demos through co-browse tours, which is something that might not be super obvious. But again, taking this link, sharing it with your customers and saying, hey, this is actually how you set this up, or this is our preferred way of you setting things up. It's a very cool feature to have. And then once all of that is set and good to go, we will obviously launch it. Yes, that is true. I did forget to put in the description, but I will actually disable this for now because I know we're running a bit short on time. And I know a lot of people probably have questions, so we can just go ahead and launch it. And now if I actually go over to that website that we've set up for, obviously the product tour itself, we can see that Kai has joined the session. I don't think you guys will probably be able to hear the audio, but it's obviously reading aloud all of the text that I've written.
You can click to be able to access the billing info.
And here's
This is
it
where
actually
you can
doing the
create a
click.
billing page for your platform.
So it was very short, obviously, but as we can see, it did actually click into the element and it did go through a flow. And that's what's super powerful about co-browse tours, is that if you're having a very complex process or even a very simple process, the process can be simplified through the co-browse feature, and it can also be super interactive in terms of user experience. I'm going to stop there in terms of like showing you guys and obviously talking about best practices. I know we have just some minutes left, and I know there's probably a lot of questions. So Isabella, if you want to jump back in here with me and maybe let me know what are some of the top questions, that would be great. And if anybody also would like to, unmute and ask the question via voice, that's fine. But the chat is there as well. So whatever you're comfortable with.
Perfect. So we'll start with the questions in the chat. We had one question from Franz. Since you have to put in a URL as starting point, do co-browse tours, product tours also work in iOS and Android or only on the web?
That is an excellent question. So right now, I did forget to mention that at the beginning of the webinar. Product tours and co-browse tours are exclusive for web-based applications at the moment. But the good news is we are working on a mobile version of product tours. It is on our roadmap. It should be releasing very soon, so look out for that. It won't necessarily work in the exact same way as a product tour, where you can obviously break down the elements and have that element breakdown and place the markers exactly on the UI elements. It'll work more like a mobile carousel when you launch the app for the first time, or you click on a specific button in the app. It would then obviously take you through a flow which would work and have kind of the same end goal as a product tour. So keep a very close eye for our mobile carousel feature, which is basically mobile product tours. That's coming very, very soon. And thanks for the question. It's great that you mentioned that.
And we have another question from Helmut. He's asking, is there an action like drag element from here to there and drop? I think he means in the editor.
That is actually a great question as well. So you can obviously go back to a product tour once it's been edited and change the positioning of these. It's not necessarily like drag and drop per se, but you can definitely change the positioning of where like where each step is. Keep in mind, product tours and co-browse tours are still very new. I don't think it's been even over a month since we've released them, or it's been almost a month exactly. So also expect that as Gleep, we're going to be pushing out a lot of updates in improving this editor, and we're always looking for your feedback. So at any point in time, anybody can open up the Gleep widget and suggest a feature, and we do look at those. If they're feasible, we do add them to our roadmap. So I encourage and I implore everybody on the call, if you'd like to see something in our product tours that you think is missing or super critical, please give us that feedback. We're always willing to listen and we're always happy to listen. And we'd love to know more from you about what's actually possible and how far can we push the limits of a tool like this.
Great. Next question is from Julia, and it has actually already been answered in the chat. So great job, guys. Julia asks, we offer a web-based software and each customer gets their own account, including their name in the URL. Therefore, it's impossible to create one tour for everybody, correct? Just to be sure if I understand it correctly. And Bart already said, Hussein, I don't know if you can show it, but under rule-based, you can add page rules so that you can basically incorporate under targeting and then rule-based exactly. You can, Hussein already has a page, but you can there add a page rule that contains dynamic stuff, as Bart already suggested in the chat. So that's great.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Perfect. I guess that's easy for us. Thanks, Bart. Jochen also has a question. What's the difference between the start page defined when creating the tour versus the one being defined for Kai? Are there use cases where these start pages differ?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really will come down to whether or not you want to actually, start the product tour through Kai, or you'd like the product tour to actually start when they visit that page. So you could set up product tours in a way where it'll only get suggested, or the user will actually only see it when they ask it in the chat to Kai. And Kai is obviously smart enough to figure out, based on the description that you've written here. If anybody also visits this Learn More link, we give you some more info on kind of how to best structure this description. But essentially, that's really the difference. So the product tour could be started completely through Kai, or it could be started obviously when they visit that specific page, which you've defined right here.
And he has a follow-up question. Can co-browsing tours also start a simple product tour?
That is also a pretty good question. So if I understood correctly, it's basically a standard product tour that could then be created or flow as a co-browse tour. If I understood the question correctly, Yoshin, if I didn't, then please let me know.
Nothing in the chat, so I think Hussein, you're good to go ahead.
No worries, no worries. I know Yoshin personally, and I know that there was a lot of interest on these. So Yoshin, we're more than happy to follow up, and maybe we can even schedule a in-depth call with you as well. And this applies for all of our customers, guys. I know that obviously we have some time constraints when it comes to webinars. We're trying to do a lot more education for our customers and letting you guys know how to actually get the most out of Gleep. But if anybody is really struggling, if anybody is really having a lot of questions or doubts about how do I actually get this done or what's the best way to actually do this, please feel free to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to help in really any way we can. And even if it's a more personalized session, if it's something that needs to just get some more input on the use case and what you're trying to achieve, we can definitely set those up with you, and we're more than happy to really help in any way we can. As most of you are already Gleep customers on the call, I'm sure you guys are very familiar with how good our process is.
Jochen actually reached out to us. He said, I meant more embedding a product tour within a co-browsing tour.
Gotcha. Okay. That is actually a very interesting use case. Embedding a standard tour and a co-browse tour could definitely work, because if you basically have reached or have went through a flow and you've reached a page where you don't want it to be interactive anymore, you could definitely set that up, but it would still involve you having to create a co-browse tour and then ending it, like having the co-browse tour end on the page where the standard product tour should start. So it's a little bit complex to set up, but I think it's definitely possible. If not, again, we're also more than happy to take a look at that. And if it's not actually, technically possible, more than happy to take a look to be able to see how we can actually do that. But as far as my knowledge goes, I'm pretty sure that this is possible and you can actually do this.
And Helmut, I think we also kind of misunderstood Helmut. That was a drag and drop question. He said, to clarify my question, what I meant was not to drag and drop when creating the tour, but show a drag and drop action to the user during the co-browse session.
Interesting. Yeah, that's thanks for the clarification, first of all, Helmut. And although that isn't supported at the moment, again, this is the type of feedback that we love getting from you guys and getting from our customers. So I think that would be actually very cool to have, and we'll definitely talk to the team about possibly adding that as a feature request. So that's really great. But unfortunately, right now, I don't think there's a way to actually do this in the product tour itself, unfortunately.
Perfect. And then we have a question from Bart. Have some of your customers already deployed these co-browse tours, and what were the use cases you've seen most?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the standard tours, they've been around for a very long time. Co-browse tours, we do have some customers already using them. I have seen that they're not really using the voiceover feature that much because maybe you don't really want your customer to feel like the experience is AI driven, or there's a lot of AI involved in the experience. Maybe you just only want to have that ability of having an actual flow and having the ability to click on certain elements. And then if you click on those elements, it will take you to those relevant pages. Um, Definitely a very big use case is, again, setting things up for the first time. So whenever, a user creates an account, whenever one of your customers has, ended maybe their trial and they're actually a paying customer, at that point, I've seen a co-browse tour being deployed in a fairly complex SaaS application. It usually involved around maybe 12 or 13 steps, which really isn't that high considering how complex their SaaS application was. But yes, we definitely have seen some success here. And the use case really comes down to what I was kind of talking about earlier in the webinar. So what do you ultimately want to achieve when your user or your customer has finished this product tour? Is it education? So do you want to educate them and let them know how to use your product? Is it preventative customer care? So are you doing this because this is maybe a common pitfall many customers have faced before, and it's usually maybe a complex part in your process? So you'd like to make it just easier and kind of reduce your support volume a little bit? Is it highlighting a new feature? So is it something that you've launched recently that is also maybe fairly complex to create? At that point, obviously having a co-browse tour would be really great. And it also definitely comes down to, again, the most important thing is how interactive do you want it to be? Do you want your users to kind of sit back, relax, have the AI guide them through, click on the elements, and have it be kind of as smooth as possible? Or would you like it to be more on the lines of having the customer kind of help themselves? They click on next when they're actually ready to move on to the next step. And you're kind of giving them the voice or giving them their voice and kind of highlighting their voice more in a standard tour versus a co-browse tour. And it's ultimately also going to differ for your industry, for your platform, how complex your platform is. All of these things definitely need to be taken into consideration. But again, a big reason why we created product tours and we created kind of this engine for it is anybody can launch these. Again, you don't have to be a developer, you don't have to be a product expert, you don't have to be someone who's on the marketing team. Literally anybody can just create a product tour. It can serve as a great way to, again, educate users. It can be a complete demo and actually an interactive demo where you're seeing, different elements being clicked and pages being navigated through. It could also be just a great way to say, hey, you know, we've listened to you, we've taken your feedback, we've launched this new feature that we think you might find interesting and that we think you'll be using quite heavily. We've created, you know, a little something for you to just tell you how to use it, how to get started with it. And yeah, that's kind of the main things you kind of have to consider. And definitely as time goes on, I think more and more of our customers will start to use the co-browse tour once they realize just really how powerful it actually is.
We have one final question I think that we can still answer, although we're a little bit over time already. But Mark's asking, is there an ability to set the wait time between steps? Example, if there is a lot of text to read in different steps.
Yeah, that is a great point. So, Mark, unfortunately, not right now. This is a feedback that we've received from a lot of people already, where you'd like to have some time-based rules between steps, because a lot of times what could potentially happen and was also kind of happening in the past, if any of our customers here on the call are potentially using like Go High Level to manage their business or manage their websites. Depending on what you're using, sometimes the product tour would load before the content of the page itself. And that's where time-based rules would really come in handy. We've obviously fixed that issue, so it shouldn't be happening for anybody, but it opened kind of our eyes towards having those time rules, because maybe you do actually need to wait, especially in the co-browse tour. You maybe want to wait a couple of seconds for the customer to actually get it or feel comfortable that they've gotten it, for them to actually move on to the next step. Maybe the steps are going too fast. So we're definitely going to be adding that in the future. And again, that's really awesome feedback. So thanks, Mark.
Thank you all so much for your time and great feedback as well. Thanks, Hussein, for walking us through co-browsing tours. In terms of the feedback we've received, we have a recording of this, which we'll also send out to all of you guys so that you can rewatch and revisit if needed. And therefore, we also have the feedback. If you wanted to also report a feature request for your feedback, also great. And we'll definitely be in touch. And thank you all so much for coming along, and keep an eye out for hopefully more webinars to come from our end.
Absolutely. Thank you, Isabella, and thank you to our lovely customers. It's always great getting your feedback, and it's always great showing you what we're building. And like Isabella mentioned, please, if you have any feedback in the future, we would always love to hear it, whether it's positive or negative. We really always take it into consideration. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you guys some, background, some great insights on how to get the most out of product tours. And like we mentioned, if anybody needs any further help, you can always reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to help in really any way we can. Thank you so much, everybody. It was great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Isabella.